Hi, welcome to Behind Sports. My name is Gregory Scott Rynan, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest today is Jolene Mizzone from Main Events Boxing Promotion Firm. Hi, Jolene. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, how are you?
Doing very well.
Good.
I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the industry, and some of your about the actual company as well, and your experience there.
I started in 1997, 16 years ago as a receptionist, basically, and moved my way up. Now I'm vice president of operations, doing the matchmaking, the day-to-day operations of the office. Main Events has been around since 1976 and has still been going strong. We've had our ups and downs.
Sure.
Now we're on the upswing. We have an exclusive deal with NBC Sports Network.
Yep.
We're now working with HBO again. We just got a deal for one of our light heavyweights for a championship fight on HBO against Sergey Kovalov, who's our fighter, against Nathan Cleverly.
Great.
And we're just excited with what's going on now in the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys have been, like you said, around since the 70s, so you've seen quite a bit of large fights. And in fact, you guys have been directly involved with some of the biggest pay-per-view boxing matches that in history, really. 2002, I believe, was Lewis Tyson. Is that right?
Yes.
I know
yes.
that's up there as one of the highest revenue fights to the day, I guess.
Yes, and it was the highest stressful fight to the day too for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about that? About kind of what went into that fight?
Well, a funny story. This is a backstory about that fight. When the fight was first made, I had to go to Memphis. At the time, I was doing logistics, travel, and hotel and everything. And
Okay.
at the time, they sent me to Memphis on my own and said, this is going to be a big fight. Let's grab as many hotel rooms as we could in Mississippi and Memphis. So I went there. I got stuck there for 3 days. Basically ended up reserving about 500 hotel rooms.
Wow.
When HBO, Showtime, and Tyson's crew, because we were Lennox Lewis's promoter at the time,
Right.
went to get their rooms and start making reservations, there was no more left in the city.
Oh boy.
So I had Tyson's people calling me, Showtime, HBO, everybody begging me for rooms, and we had to divvy them out that way. And that was my first big fight to do something like that. So I just thought I had to get all the rooms. And that's just kind of a backstory. And there was no rooms in the city. They were building new hotels for the event. It was a mess, kind of.
And that's a huge event to be your first one going in. I mean, talk about trial by fire right there. Boom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And because you were dealing with HBO, you're dealing with Showtime, you're dealing with Tyson's people, you're dealing with it was a lot of dealing with different personalities, different egos. So, I mean, the week of the fight, I was out there for 3 weeks before the fight.
Okay. And what kind of activities are you guys doing? So you have a large fight. You're obviously doing a lot of local stuff, but you're doing a lot of promotional stuff for television. I assume you have to prep the fighters for media and all that. What kind of stuff is going into it as far as
all the
activities?
Leading up to event, there's so much. There's everything from the logistics, the hotel, the travel. Then you have your undercard that you're matching the fighters. You're making those deals. You got to deal with contracts, with sending those out. You have to deal with all the logistical, with TV, with setting up the arena. A lot of people think that as promoters, we just show up and the boxing ring is there, the chairs are in place,
Sure.
the TV's in place, but there's always somebody overseeing that, overseeing every detail from the arena to the fighters entourage, to the fighters' family. Then you have, like you said, the press and the marketing that they have to do when they have to make appearances, which sometimes could be a difficult thing, especially the week of the fight, because you have guys, not so much heavyweights, but other guys that are trying to cut weight that aren't the most pleasant people sometimes, which is understandable.
Sure.
So, it's kind of, you deal with different personalities, but, we have, people in this office that are close with certain fighters, and we use that to our advantage to get them to, do things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So have you ever had any opportunity or any situations where you're trying to get a fighter to the arena or whatnot, and there's stumbling blocks of actually getting someone there, or if any kind of other daily activities that you can talk about day of.
Not so much, getting them to the arena, but not so much the bigger fights, but it's the fights underneath.
Yeah.
Now with what I deal with, you make the match, you send out the contract, they sign the contract, and this is all the way leading up to the fight that you're having your fingers crossed that they show up.
Sure.
The week of a fight, when my phone rings, I'm cringing because is it somebody telling me so-and-so got hurt?
Yeah.
This one's pulling out of the fight. This one's not showing up. So leading up to the fight, it's like I said, it's making the match, getting the contract, them showing up on site, them showing up at the weigh-in. I'm not relieved until everybody's in the ring.
Right. Absolutely.
We had a situation when we had a fighter, Jeff Lacey. He was making his pro debut on Showtime. Mm-hmm. And he was a 2000 Olympian, U.S. Olympian. So we get the opponent at the time. They weigh in. Now, Jeff was very ripped. I mean, he had a beautiful body, big muscles, everything. They both weigh in. The next day, his opponent was nowhere to be found because he decided to get on a train and leave. He didn't want to fight him then. Didn't say anything to anybody.
He just took off.
Just took off.
And at that point, everything just stops. I mean, is there just a complete hold? Everything just stops.
Yeah, it's the day of the fight. You're not going to find a replacement because there's medicals that have to be taken, all that. So the day of the fight, he just up and left.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are certain things that's why I'm so on edge. Even with the big fights, I'll give you another example. We had a fight January on NBC Sports Network, Sergey Kovalev and Gabriel Campillo. Mm-hmm. Gabriel Campillo's advisor is Samson Lukowitz. Okay. Every time my phone would ring and it had Samson's number on it, I was always scared what happened with Camp. Was he going to tell me it was injured? Was he going to tell me this? And there was some drama with that fight. Campillo was coming in from Spain. Mm-hmm. The fight was at Mohegan Sun. I'm at Mohegan. He just arrives. Matt from my office calls me. He's picking him up from the airport in JFK. He's not getting off the plane. Next thing you know, a customs officer comes out. They have him held in they have him held in customs because his visa he didn't have his visa paperwork. Mm-hmm. Make a long story short, I end up talking to the customs officer, explaining what he's coming in for the fight. Thank God the customs officer was from New Jersey.
Right.
And he was from the town right next to us. So it kind of, he's like, they ended up fining him, but they ended up letting him in the country. So that was 3 days before a fight.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, are you guys so you have a big ticket fight. Are you guys setting up all the fights before the main event as well? Or is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's when you just had called, I was working on our August 3rd show. Uh-huh. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 fights underneath the triple header. So we have a total of 9 fights on the card. So we make everything from the 4-rounders all the way up to the main event. So that's what I was working on, looking at tape of different opponents and stuff for the guys underneath.
That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of coordinating, if nothing else.
Yes, and a lot of different personalities.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. Okay, so we touched on the Tyson Lewis fight. You guys promoted probably, I'd say one of the top 3 fights of all time, or at least the trilogies. These guys, I think they were dubbed as the second, the second pair behind Ali Frazier was Gotti Ward, and you guys have promoted all 3 of those fights. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
So can you talk a little bit about that, as far as, maybe after the first fight and everybody realizing that they're going to have another one, and some of the, just the epic fights that those guys had. Can you talk a little bit about those fights for the trilogy?
It's funny because we always talk about this. Both guys that were going in, Furrow and Mickey, that were going into the fight, they both had losses on their record, mm-hmm. which in these days is unheard of. They get defeated, and the bottom line is styles make fights. And Gotti Ward, we knew
they had the right style to make a great fight.
Yep.
Did we know it was going to be as tremendous as it was? No, none of us did.
Sure.
We knew it was going to be a good fight in the ring. And a funny story that a lot of people don't know about the first Gaddy Ward fight is in the 9th round when Arturo went down from that body shot by Mickey. I have be sitting in the corner of Arturo, not directly in the corner, but in the press right behind his team. And Buddy McGirt was training him at the time. And his good friend Mike Skronsky was working the corner also, Arturo. So Arturo goes down. Buddy literally was on the top of the apron to stop the fight.
Wow.
And at that point, Mike pulled Buddy by his corner jacket and pulled him down. So if the ref would have seen it or how they, that fight could have been stopped. And Mike Skronsky knew Arturo so well. He's like, no, he still has something. He still has something. And pulled Buddy down from basically the top stair. So, who knows what would have happened if it would have been stopped.
Right. The rest of it doesn't. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. But Arturo was that whole fight, we had a lot of fun with it.
Sure.
The first time in Mohegan, and then when we did it the second and third time in Atlantic City, we all had fun. We got along with Mickey. It was a fun event to promote because everybody got along, and it was just a fun event to promote.
Well, and it's well known too that the two fighters had great respect for each other when just going in. I mean, a lot of times you don't see that, but these two guys, you could just tell how much respect they had for each other when they were fighting.
Yeah,
And to me, I think that makes it even better fight. The respect level. That's great. I would like to touch on the heavyweight class. The heavyweight class has been, as I grew up, it was the heavyweight class where, was the darling of everybody of the boxing world pretty much. And going back as many years as I can count.
All right.
What do you think about the heavyweight class currently, where it stands and where it's going?
Well, I've been for the past 4 years fighting with people about the heavyweight division that it's dead. My opinion, and I know it's easier said than done, if you take the Klitschko's out of it, it's not a dead division.
Right.
Last year, we had 8 NBC Sport Network fights, and on those 8 cards, I believe we had, I think it was 12 or 13 heavyweight fights that were very competitive fights. In the heavyweight division, if you take out the Klitschko's, and you match guys, everybody is evenly matched. An evenly matched fight makes for a good fight.
Right.
Whether it's 2 guys who maybe aren't the most skilled guys, but they're going to make for a good, because they're evenly matched and styles make fights. So we've had so many heavyweight fights on all our NBC Sports Network cards. I mean, we started last year with a fighter named Brian Jennings. He was on the first NBC Sports Network card. Him and Maurice Byarm stepped up and took the fight. They were young guys, 9-0 guys that haven't fought over 6 rounds. They both stepped up and took a 10-round fight. Brian Jennings right now is being called the top U.S. heavyweight. I mean, and that was after 5 fights or so. He's the top. So people, the public, they're dying for a heavyweight. They just want to like a heavyweight. They just want to know a heavyweight. They want to be introduced to a heavyweight, and they want that American heavyweight. They want that American heavyweight. It's the same thing with Tomasz Adamek, where yes, he's from Poland. All his fights have been here in the U.S. So we're very good. It was the same thing with Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis was from England.
Right.
He was introduced to the U.S. He fought here in the U.S. David Tua, Andrew Galata. So it's not only about American heavyweight, it's just about heavyweights. But the American people, they just want a heavyweight. They want somebody to like. There hasn't been anybody introduced to them.
Yep.
So it's about introducing heavyweights to people. Because that is, I mean, you hear, with my friends, oh, who's fighting? Oh, well, it's a heavyweight fight. That catches their attention.
Sure.
It's a heavyweight fight. Oh, who is it? People just want to like a heavyweight.
Everybody likes seeing two big guys going at it. There's nothing better than that.
Yeah, because anything could happen.
You're
they
right.
both usually with the heavyweights, somebody packs a punch.
Right.
Somebody does.
Right.
So you know what? Somebody could be a great boxer, but if they're fighting a puncher, what's going to happen? Is he going to outbox him? Is he going to, it's just, and that's the case with the little guys, but with the heavyweights, anything could happen at any time.
Right.
With heavyweights.
Yeah. That's so having the introduction to it, do you see this coming up in the next 5-10 years? I mean, do you see the heavyweight class getting back into the limelight?
I see within the next year that you're going to see within the next year, you're going to see heavyweight fights on major networks.
That's great.
That's what our goal is, is to, because, it's the same thing with talking to different networks. It's like people just want to like a heavyweight. They want to be introduced. We just got to introduce the heavyweights to them. And then there's people to match them with because it's the same level. So you're going to get a good fight.
Yeah.
It's an argument I have sometimes with a lot of reporters. If I do a heavyweight fight and, like I did a heavyweight fight that this one reporter, me and him were fighting this year about. It was this Ukraine guy, Zard Glaskov, that we signed against Malik Scott.
Okay.
Said it's a horrible fight. He's telling me it's a horrible fight. It's a horrible fight. I said, okay, tell me who you think's going to win. He said, I don't know. I said, well, then I did my job.
Yeah.
Then that's not a horrible fight.
You're right.
If you can't sit here and say so-and-so is going to win, then that's when we did our job.
Yeah.
It's about, who's going to win. It could it could be, that's what makes it interesting.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, you can look at the Gotti Ward fight just for that. I mean, it was those guys. Yeah. I mean, it was, like you said, I guess the matchup and how they fight and the styles that make the fight. That's awesome. Good deal. So kind of keying off that heavyweight class, MMA and boxing. MMA has grown significantly in popularity. And, some would say that it's going to be taking over boxing soon. That it's going to be the new fighting in the ring. I'd love to hear your opinion on that and what you think about MMA versus boxing and where you think they're both going.
Well, boxing is called the sweet science for a reason.
Right.
What's MMA called? I mean, my personal opinion, and this may not go over well with MMA people, but the high school wrestler could become an MMA guy.
Right.
The street guy who fights in the street cannot become a boxer.
Right.
It's an art. A lot of guys that are in the MMA, and I give them credit, they work hard. I'm sure they work hard. There's guys off the street that can come in and become MMA. You cannot come off the street or come out of any sport and be a boxer. You can't do it. That's why, it's called the sweet science. I don't think MMA will ever take over boxing. I just don't think it will. It has two different types of crowds, at the events. But I have this argument with my friends all the time, because they're MMA fans. And, the bottom line is you have to respect with what fighters go through and what they have to do to get to the point they're at. Not that I don't respect MMA guys, but, a lot of this stuff is gimmicks. And I don't like the gimmick thing. It's, you have to, as a boxer, you really have to, because you could get hurt. MMA, if you don't know what you're doing, you get on the ground, you tap out, you're done.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big fan of MMA. I don't think MMA will ever take over boxing.
Why can't they coexist? Do you see them as, to you, they're two different things, completely two different things. But in the public eye, they're always brought together, and there's always that conversation of MMA versus boxing. Is MMA the end of boxing? When's boxing? And probably, just like you said, we need to like and to know a new heavyweight. To me, that quiets a lot of the noise. But if they're so separate, if they're so different, why can't they just coexist? But it's not like that. The media won't let it happen.
No. And you know what the thing is? We're trying it. We're trying it, but it's just two different types of crowd. With NBC. NBC is showing MMA now. NBC Sports Network. So when we had our show June 14th, our boxing event, after they showed the MMA, they had an MMA event in Vegas. So to kind of, we're trying to, co-promote in a sense, but it's two different sports, it's just hard. It's just two different sports, like hockey and baseball is two different sports.
Right.
So. I don't think that it ever will.
Gotcha. All right. You have been in the industry for a long time. You have seen, I am sure, more than you can even say on this interview. What is, if you can even pinpoint it, what's the most outlandish or unique moment that you've seen so far in your career?
There's so many.
Right.
I mean, there's so many that maybe I don't think any of them are really outlandish, but I guess other people would.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you a couple of things, like a common thing with certain athletes in the businesses. They have more than one girl. So it's, put these tickets here. I need these for their fights in different areas.
Right.
And there was this was years ago, a particular fighter that had two girls. Whoever was doing the tickets messed them up, and these two sat next to each other.
Oh my.
It was a big fight. And the one girl said, "Oh, that's my boyfriend." The other girl said, "No, that's my boyfriend." Well, anyway, make a long story short, they ended up beating the shit out of each other in the stands.
Wow.
So
so people got two fights that night.
One. Yeah. That's just one. I mean, but there's so many with different fighters. I mean, Arturo, the stories that I could tell you about him. I mean, he was a great guy. This is an outlandish, but it's just a good story about him. Me and him were very close, just as friends.
Sure.
And he was fighting at the time. It was in Atlantic City. I want to say he was fighting maybe not Bronco McCart, Gianluca Bronco.
Okay.
And it was about 3 days before the fight. We're all down there, and I was playing the roulette. So I'm playing roulette, and my number on roulette is 22. I'm playing, so I look, my phone's ringing. It's Arturo. I'm like, I'm doing good. I can't answer it.
Sure. Rings
again. It's Arturo. I'm like, all right, well, he is fighting. I guess let me answer it. So I walk away from the table, and I'm like, what's up, Arturo? It was something stupid he asked me. And I'm standing there, I'm looking at the table, and I see the number 22 comes out. And Arturo loved to gamble too, so he got it.
Okay.
I said, really? I said, the number 22 just came out. I said, I just fucking lost all this money from answering your call. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. I'm sorry. I'm like, whatever, it is what it is. The next week, I had to go to his house to pick him up. He was doing a photo shoot. So he gives me a card, like a thank you card, and there's a gift certificate for Macy's in there. I'm like, Arturo, you didn't have to do this. No, all for you do for me, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so a couple weeks later, I go to Macy's. I get something. I forget what it was. I give the girl the gift certificate. She rings it in. She's like, "Oh, somebody must really like you." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "This gift certificate's for $2,000.
Wow.
So I was like, "Oh, all right. Well, give me it back. I'll continue going shopping." So I called her, like, "You didn't have to do that." He's like, "No, I know you lost some money on roulette. So, I just wanted to make sure that you were taken care of." But that's the kind of, like, Hari had another story about him that is a tremendous story. He was fighting, it was one of his end fights. It was Alfonso Gomez.
Okay.
And every time we were in Atlantic City, him and his team would always take my car out because he would go down in a limo. But he'd have to get out of the hotel to go tanning, get his hair done, just to get out. So every fight, they take my car. So this fight. It was 2 days before. It was the day of the weigh, or 2 days before the fight. My cell phone rings. "What's up, Arturo? We just got in a car accident." Now he's fighting in 2 days. He has my car. So I don't know what to, I'm like, "Are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Somebody just hit us from the back. There's not a lot of damage on your truck." And at that time I had a Toyota 4Runner.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, and the guy looked like he didn't really have money. So I just told him to go. "Okay, you're okay?" Yeah. Fight happens. So now I don't drive my car the whole week. I go to leave the day after the fight to drive my truck. I look, there's not much damage, dents, I get in my truck to leave. It sounds like a friggin' airplane. The guy hit the bottom of my truck and pushed the muffler in.
Oh, man.
So now I had to drive back up north 2 hours with my car sounding like an airplane. He thought it was the funniest thing. I mean, he paid for everything or what.
Sure.
But those are the kind of good times that we had with him because it was like a family, you know?
Yeah. That's great. That's awesome. As far as being in the sports industry and some of the people watching this are dying to get in the sports industry, just really trying to, get in somewhere. What would you say to someone like that to give them a little bit of advice actually to get in there?
Well, we have a lot of interns that work here. So my first advice to anybody, whether it's in boxing or anywhere in the sports industry, because if you're a fan, you tend to be a groupie. You have to exit that out. When I started with Main Events, was I a big boxing fan? No, I wasn't. It was a job at the time. But for the first 5 years that I worked here, I didn't have an opinion. I didn't say a word. I just soaked everything in.
Right.
Because you could be a boxing fan, but to be a promoter or to work for a promoter, it's two different worlds.
Sure.
So my advice to anybody getting into the sports industry, whether it's boxing, baseball, you could be a fan, but being in the industry, it's two different worlds. So you have to sit back and soak everything in and learn. Don't have opinions because you don't have a right to have an opinion yet. Sure. You got to take everything in and really soak it in. That's what I did. I mean, I was under Carl Moretti, who was in the business for 30 years, who now works for Top Rank, now with Russell Pelt. So I mean, these are guys that have been in the business for 30 years. First 5 years, I didn't say anything. Now that no one could shut me up, but I have a right to,
Sure. You've earned it.
Yeah, but you really have to in any sports industry, because a lot of people that go into that, they go into it as a fan. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that takes over. You just have to sit back and learn. That's the biggest thing. And that's what I tell everybody, even my interns that start. We've had interns that worked here. We have an intern that worked here for over a year with not getting paid nothing. He just got hired full time now. Yeah. And that was one of the first things. Now he's working under me, helping me. That's one of the first things I told him. And he was a huge fan. He watches everything boxing and he knows boxing, but he doesn't say much. He gives opinions, but he's learning, because you have to learn. You could know fighter A against fighter B, but you got to know your place.
Right.
And since he's doing that, it's easier for me to open up and say, okay, Matt, here's something, look for an opponent for this guy, giving him stuff like that to, dip his feet in.
Yeah. And that's true with probably anything, really. Nobody wants a kid coming in acting like a know-it-all, even if they know the sport. They don't know the ins and outs of the business. They don't know the rest of that stuff. So learning, listening.
I get a lot of emails, and now it's funny because I used to hire all the interns. Now I'm having Matt hire all the interns. Okay. So, I get an email from a guy, I'm a big boxing fan. I could assist with matchmaking. No, you can't. Right. You cannot come in and just start matchmaking.
Yeah.
It's
who is he? No one's going to listen to him at that point.
Right. I didn't start matchmaking until I was in the business for 10 years.
Right.
I didn't want to.
Yeah.
It sucks. It sucks because you gotta match these guys, and if some guys are yours, and you're putting them in a competitive fight because you got to make the public happy, and you got to make TV happy. Yep. And if something doesn't go right and they don't win, who are they looking at? They're looking at me. You got so and so beat.
Yeah.
But no, it was a winnable fight for them, because anybody I put guys in with, it's a competitive fight. It's a winnable fight. If you can't go in and win that fight, don't blame it on me.
Sure.
I mean, if I put somebody in over their head and they get destroyed, well, then you know what? Look at me and blame me,
right.
Yeah,
no, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, I really appreciate you joining us and giving us all these stories. These stories are ones that cannot be gotten anywhere else, and that's awesome. I mean, being there for all these fights and getting to know the boxers, that's priceless. That's really good stuff. Before we go, can you pub your fight again for August 3?
Yes, it's August 3rd at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut, on NBC Sports Network. It starts at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The main event is Curtis Stevens and Saul Roman, which is a 160-pound middleweight fight. We're looking for Curtis Stevens within the next couple of months or by the beginning of the year to fight the likes of Golovkin, Chavez, Martinez. So we're getting him right into a title fight soon. Then we have Tomas Adamek, who's coming back from his December 22nd fight. He's fighting Tony Grano from Connecticut. That's a heavyweight fight. Awesome. We have Eddie Chambers, who is fighting his first fight at cruiserweight. He was a former heavyweight contender. He's fighting a guy from South Africa, Makunu, who is a guy who took the fight on one day's, I asked him one day, they took it. So and he's a puncher, so it's a
Okay.
boxer against a puncher. And then I have a stacked undercard with Carl Dargan, Tony Harrison, Czar Glaskov, who's a heavyweight, who's coming back again. And then a lot of local kids from Connecticut will be making, will be seen. And also with NBC Sports Network, we do another show called Future Stars. So the guys on this undercard for August 3rd will be taped and they'll be shown at a later date. So fans will get to see those 6-rounders, those 4-rounders, the guys coming up, they'll get to see those fights as well.
Good deal. Lots of entertainment packed in one night. That's for sure.
Yes. And you can buy tickets from Ticketmaster, August 3rd, Mohegan Sun.
Awesome. Jolene, Mizzone, thank you so much with Main Events. I really appreciate your time. And, I'd love to get you back on and talk to you again.
Okay, no problem. Thank
right,
you.
Thanks a lot. My name is Gregory Scott Reinen with Behind Sports. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.